Psalm 137 is where we're at in our series. This is a very unique psalm in when you just do a surface reading of it, it looks like there's just no way that this can be part of the Bible because it just is too horrendous, too horrid. It just really attacks us. And I'm going to do is we're going to look at the last two verses. This psalm only has 9 verses. We're going to look at the last two so you understand kind of where we're going to, and then we're going to see how this is a psalm that is most often misinterpreted. It was amazing how many different things I read and different ways of looking at it, and 99% were wrong. Or either that or I'm wrong. Okay, we're going to find out. Because I just disagreed with pretty much everybody out there because I think they missed one key little ingredient. Okay, so starting off, like I said, we're going to look at verse 8 and 9, and we're going to look at it in 3 different versions to begin with. And the reason we're doing that is because the wording change is a little different, and it's very important when we get to the end. So going through our Bibles, which is the New American Standard Version, 1995, O daughter of Babylon, you desolate one, how blessed be the one who repays you with the recompense with which you have repaid us. How blessed will be the one who seizes and dashes your little ones against the rock. This is the Bible. Let's look at it again in the New King James Version. O daughter of Babylon, who are to be destroyed, happy is the one who repays you as you served us. Happy is the one who takes and dashes your little one against the rock. You see the difference? Or did you miss it?
I missed it.
Okay, then let's try another version. In Young's literal translation, which is a pretty good translation because that literally just takes the literal translation. It doesn't try to formulate. O daughter of Babylon, O destroyed one, O the happiness of him who repayeth thee thy deed that thou hast done to us. O the happiness of him who doth seize and hath dashed thy sucklings on the rock. Okay, now we've read these 2 verses, 3 different versions, and we're still appalled, right? Psalm 137 is listed as an imprecator. Yeah, I even got it set down here, phonetically spelt, and I still can't do it. How's that? Okay. Impracticatory is what it is. Yes, it is. It's listed as one of those impracticatory psalms. And impracticatory psalms in the book of Psalms is that ask God to bring judgment, calamity, or curses upon the enemies of the psalmist or of God. And I personally think this one's mislabeled because I don't think that's what it is. Okay, but it also means to pray evil against or to invoke disaster upon. Now, there are some that go that way. This one, like I said, it's in that list of those like 10 or 12 or something like that. But I think it's wrong. And we're going to, as we go through, you're either going to agree with me it's wrong or you're going to disagree with me that it's wrong, but we're going to learn something, okay? So we got to first get a little history, okay? Because this is talking about Babylon, and we have to kind of begin with Zedekiah. Zedekiah was the last king in Judah before it was destroyed by Babylon, okay? So in 2 Kings 24, verse 19, talking about Zedekiah, and he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. He was one more of a long list of evil kings. So as the children of Israel, that's one thing I learned too that was fascinating. The children of Israel kept falling back into idol worship. After they were conquered by the Babylonians, they did not fall back into idol worship. All through their existence, they kept falling back into worshiping idols until this time in history, which was fascinating because it was kind of like how they finally learned. Okay, after all these centuries, they finally learned to stay away from idol worship. So what do? Because of the fact that they're human beings, they're flawed, they drifted into, instead of idol worship, into what I call hybrid Judaism. That's where we get the Pharisees and all the additions to the canon, to the law. They had all these strict things that you had to do. They tried so hard to stay away from idols and be true to God, they went beyond what God told them to do. And that's why, by the time of Jesus, he called the Pharisees a brood of vipers. Because they were no longer just doing what God had said, they're adding their own stuff to it. The church today can do the same thing. It can take what God clearly instructs his people and then just add stuff to it and add stuff to it. We may do that. We may not add to the Word of God, and we may not take away from the Word of God. It's complete, it's full. Jeremiah also lived during this time when the Babylonians came and conquered. So, and here's a little bit what he had to say in chapter 12, verse 1. Righteous are you, O Lord, that I would plead my case with you. Indeed, I would discuss matters of justice with you. Why has the way of the wicked prospered, and why are all those who deal in treachery at ease? A common question even today. Why do evil people prosper? It doesn't make sense. You would think that God Almighty is on the side of his people, that his people would prosper, and that evil people wouldn't prosper, and the opposite seems to be true. The reality, we don't know what it means to prosper. We think prospering is becoming rich and strong and lots of influence and all of these things, that's prosperous. No, not necessarily. Matter of fact, quite often it's the opposite. Prospering is growing in a relationship with Jesus Christ, which in turn helps us to grow in relationships with other people around us. That's prospering. Anybody here who thinks that their wealth is in the bank, that also has a family, a loving family, and doesn't realize that that's their wealth, that's what's so good, and that is a gift from God, you're missing what the gift is. So the psalmist in the next 4 verses, the psalmist looks back with sorrow as he saw the destruction that unfolded before his eyes. See, you got to remember, in that time in history, when a nation would rise up against another nation, and of course here the Babylonians, they had surrounded Jerusalem. And of course they do that because you've got all these big walls, it's kind of hard to get through, but in order to weaken the people inside, you just surround it and don't let nobody bring no food in. After a while, that has a really, really positive effect or negative effect depending on what side of the wall you're on, right? And this is what they did. And things got so bad that there even are stories, they're not in the Bible stories, but historical stories, where people were actually cooking their kids because the starvation was so bad. Okay, and so here the psalmist, he's writing it from a first-person account. He's writing this because he witnessed the horrendous, horrible things that took place. So he witnesses all these terrible acts, and now he's taken captive, and he's brought to Babylon. And here he's sitting by the rivers of Babylon. There we sat down and wept when we remembered Zion. They had been taken away. They're now into this foreign land as a conquered people. He's one of the conquered people. And he's sitting there by the banks of the river and just starts bawling because of what had happened. Not just to him, but all his people. Horrendous things that happened. There was huge slaughter. I mean, many men, women, and children were killed in the whole process. Things that we can't envision, we can't imagine what took place. But he wept because as he remembered Zion. And then verses 2 and 3, upon the willows in the midst of it, we hung our harps. For there our captors demanded of us songs, and our tormentors mirth, saying, sing us to one of the songs of Zion. They're alongside of the river. What trees grow alongside of rivers? Willows. Actually, willows like to be alongside of a river. And they put their harps. Basically, what he's saying here is our musical instruments, those things that made us happy, that we made mirth with, we've set them aside. There is nothing left to be happy about. Everything that has happened to us recently is nothing but bad and disastrous. And now our captors, they're mocking us. They're saying, come on, I want to hear those songs that you used to always sing. All those songs of praise, all those songs that lifted you up. I want you to play those for us. Verse 4, they answer, how can we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? With all this disaster that has struck them, and now their captors are wanting them to sing cheerful songs. It would be like, I say, we have a disastrous thing happen, and somebody comes along and let's just sing this song that lifts you all up and gets you all excited again. No, I can't. I can't do it because I'm so beaten down. And in verse 5 and 6, the psalmist laments his situation, and he swears never to forget. Now, we've heard this recently in our own country after 9/11. There was that line, never forget. We will never forget. And it's really the same thing here. He's saying, we'll never forget. Because here he goes on, if I forget you, O Jerusalem, may my right hand forget her skill. In other words, if I can forget what Jerusalem was, may I no longer actually be able to even do anything. The skills that I had are gone. May my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth if I do not remember you, if I do not exalt Jerusalem above my chief joy. If I can't go back and exalt Jerusalem and say, look at it, this is what we had. This is what we lost. I may never forget what we did have. If I do not remember you, if I do not exalt Jerusalem above my chief joy, because Jerusalem is actually the city of God. If I can't get back to that chief joy, I have nothing. Verse 7, remember, O Lord, against the sons of Edom, the day of Jerusalem, who said, raise it to its very foundation. Well, the sons of Edom, those are actually the descendants of Esau. Okay, Esau, of course, was part of Abraham's line. But Esau, of course, was the twin brother of Jacob. So you have Jacob, which you get the Jews, and then you have Esau, which you get the Edomites. Okay, but really these are first cousins when you look at it. As Jerusalem is getting attacked and destroyed, the Edomites are kind of standing off to the side. You kind of think of this like they're the cheering section. Okay, they're the cheering section for the Babylonians. And they're hollering out, yes, destroy him, destroy him, destroy him. And the Jews, of course, these are our cousins. They should be defending us, not attacking us. But they are. It was bad enough that what happened to them. Here were their own armies, their own cousins are cheering the enemy. In Daniel 5, now this also, of course, is at the end of Babylon. In Daniel 5:25 through 28 and 30 and 31, the fall of Babylon. Now this is the inscription that was written out. Now, we'll back up and we'll lay the foundation of what we're talking about. Nebuchadnezzar was the king that conquered Jerusalem and Israel. He took the people to Babylon. Later on, of course, like all people, he died, and his son Belshazzar took over. His son Belshazzar was a pretty rotten guy, and nowhere near the intelligence of his father. So he was being surrounded and attacked by the Medes and the Persians. In the middle of this, what he does is he throws a party. And he throws this party with the idea that I don't have nothing to worry about. Because he's in a city that has huge walls. I mean, we're talking walls hundreds of feet tall. Inside of those walls is another set of walls, even taller yet. Got nothing to worry about. At the party, suddenly a hand appears out of nowhere, and it writes on the wall. And this is what it writes. Many, many tekel of Hesed. This is the interpretation of the message. Meaning, God has numbered your kingdom and put it to an end to it. Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and found deficient. Perez, your kingdom has been divided and given over to the Medes and the Persians. That same night, Belshazzar, the Chaldean king is the Babylonian king, they were Chaldeans, okay, was slain. So Darius the Mede received the kingdom at about the age of 62. We're starting to put it together. Here's one of the key things in biblical interpretation. The Bible interprets the Bible. You always have to use other passages to support what you're concluding in this passage. So we go to Isaiah 13, verses 1, 16, and 17. The oracle concerning Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amos saw. Now that means the prophecy that Isaiah saw and wrote down. Okay, so the oracle concerning, and it's talking about Babylon. Their little ones also will be dashed to pieces before their eyes. Their houses will be plundered and their wives ravished. And their bows will mow down the young men. They will not even have compassion on the fruit of the womb, nor will their eye pity the children. Okay? This is what is going to happen to Babylon. Now we're starting to fit together a little bit. You start seeing something that has changed in what the psalmist was writing. Now we look at those verses 8 and 9 again. O daughter of Babylon, you devastated one. And here it says, how blessed, okay? Now that word, in some of the translations, the New King James, it used the word happy. And happy is actually, I think, a better word to put here. It actually, you can translate the original Hebrew into happy, you can translate it into blessed. But happy would be far more fitting, and most translations use happy. The New King James used happy. Okay? So if you change that from blessed and get rid of that blessed, because that's, I think, the word that confuses it. So how happy will be the one who repays you with the recompense with which you have repaid us. How happy will the Medes and the Persians be when they repay the Babylonians in the same way that the Babylonians did to the Jews. Follow that? It's no longer about a blessing coming upon somebody for doing these terrible things. If we look at the next verse, how happy will be the one who seizes and dashes your little ones against the rock. How happy the Medes and the Persians will be when they take the babies of the Babylonians and dash them against the rock. We go back to Isaiah 13, which prophesied this was going to happen. So it's not a validation of that what they're doing is good. It is a prophecy of what is going to happen. Nothing more. It has nothing to do with vengeance. It has nothing to do with saying that dashing babies against rocks is a good thing. It's not saying that it's a bad thing. It's not saying either which way. It basically is saying this is what's going to happen. And it did. See, the amazing thing about biblical prophecy is it always comes true. And exactly like it went to. So in verses 9, it's not prophesying about the coming destruction of Babylon. They are prophesying about the coming destruction of Babylon. It would fall to the Medes, and when it did, their people would be treated in the same manner as they treated the Jews. Has nothing to do with vengeance, or even calling God to take vengeance. Now here's another thing about history. We know our God's in control of history. Everything that's happening, God is in control of it. But sometimes we can look back at huge events in history and see how God operated. At the time, it made no sense. But when we look at it back, we can see glimpses of light and glimpses of God's work. So wicked Babylon was used by God to punish Israel for their wickedness. That happened a number of times throughout history, that children of Israel, they would do their idol worship, they'd go to do this and go do that, and God would send an enemy, and they would go back and forth. But interesting thing here is, after the children of Israel were conquered by the Babylonians, then the Babylonians are conquered by the Medes and the Persians. But the Jews are not freed. They're later on, with some of them are freed and allowed to go back and rebuild the temple. Okay? But the Medes and the Persians were conquered by the Greeks because of their wickedness. And then the Greeks, in turn, were conquered by the Romans because of their wickedness. Rome basically fell in a way that was totally different, because it wasn't necessarily conquered. It was just, it kind of like it dissolved. So the Roman Empire was never conquered by another world empire. It just kind of went away. And to a large extent, it went away because of Christianity. Now, that shows us that throughout history that God is at work in the way, the things he's doing. We go back and we look at how God punished this nation with this nation, and then we get to the Greeks. But what did the Greeks leave behind that was unique in all of history? And that was their love of philosophy. We've heard a lot, you still do, you still hear about Greek philosophy. The entire Testament, to a large extent, was written in Greek, because it was the language and people of desiring to know knowledge, to learn. That was kind of instilled in them. That was brought, you might say, kind of to the known world of this way of thinking. It changed the way people thought. The Romans came along afterwards, and what did they contribute? They provided something that no other nation throughout all of history had ever provided before, and that was the road system. They built roads, and they also provided for safe travel. The first time in all of human history where a person could travel a long distance safely and not be attacked by robbers and killed. Now, I didn't mean there still weren't some robbers and they were killing people, but to a large extent, there were ever so many miles, there would be a Roman garrison, and they would patrol that stretch of road. And it pretty much made it safe. So when it was time for Paul to travel all over the then known world, he was able to do it because the Romans had built the roads. Perfect timing. When Jesus came, Rome was in charge. A lot of this was already in place. So the message of the gospel of Jesus Christ could travel where otherwise it would not have been able to. But you also had the way that people thought, which was influenced by the Greeks. Because you remember when Paul is in Athens and he sees this statue to the unknown God, and he uses this, let me tell you about that God. See, it opened up doors for the gospel message to get into, because people were willing to think, where before they didn't. This is the way it is. You've dealt with somebody that has a mindset that's a certain way. Might be totally wrong and wacko, but they can only see this one thing. Okay? You try to reason with them. Doesn't matter. But now if you have somebody who has a mind that is open to willing to listen and discuss and to learn, now you can have a discussion. Now you can accomplish something with them. The Greeks were good at going to where you open your mind and listen. And then you weigh this against that. You learn what truth is. So when we look at history, we look at it where we're starting off in Babylon, where the children of Israel punished. Through that punishment, they leave idolatry. Because like I said, by the time of Jesus, idolatry was really not an issue with the Jews. They found their own other way of doing it, and that was hyper-Judaism. But at least you had a foundation that was good. And then you have the Greeks with the philosophy, and then you have the Romans with the roads. And the timing is just perfect. It all worked together. Throughout all of history, God has had a plan. And he's laid it out and he said, this is how things are going to be. And this psalm that we looked at, when he's talking about dashing babies against the rock, he's just talking about what is going to happen. Not saying, I want you to do this, God. I want you to allow this, God. No, it's saying, this is what is going to happen. It's a prophecy. And when you look at Isaiah 13, it clearly shows that. So this is why I said this is not one of those Psalms. It's mislabeled. And I think most people get it wrong. And if they get it wrong, why? Two things. One is looking at the meaning of the word blessed or merry or happy, not seeing how they're interchangeable. The other is totally missing Isaiah 13. Because to me, Isaiah 13 explains it. So when we know that God is controlling everything, and we can see his mighty hand at work,